event, and it will be shared publicly. Video and audio are muted upon your entry, but if you have a question to ask, you can either unmute your audio and ask it, or you can add it to the chat feature. Shannon Dabronsky is online with us, and she is part of the pre-graduate and pre-professional team that I'm also on, and she will be monitoring the chat for us so that we can be sure that all of your questions are answered. And then also, if you'll please make sure that your full name is accurate in the People tab. That will help us follow up with you after the event. Let's get started. So first of all, what is a statement of purpose? A statement of purpose is a particular genre of an essay for an application, particularly for a graduate school. It's going to tell a graduate school review committee why you want to go to graduate school, why you need to go to graduate school. It's also your chance to explain yourself as to what your skills are and your experiences. And some schools will refer to this statement type as a statement of intent or a statement of motivation. What it is not is, if you have friends, say, who are applying to medical school, it is not a personal statement. That is a very different kind of essay from a statement of purpose. A statement of purpose, I'll call it an SOP throughout our workshop today, is going to be focused on what's your purpose for going to grad school. First is the prompt itself, right? You have to know the question in order to know how to answer it. Very different from undergraduate applications where you might have had a common application or you had a prompt that was broad and to give you a chance for some creative writing, a little bit flowery. Prompts for graduate school are different. First of all, there's no standard prompt across applications. The prompt is typically going to be found in the application itself, usually no longer than 2 pages, standard 1-inch margins, and then the other formatting like spacing, font size, and style are going to depend on the program requirements. So a difference between undergraduate and graduate school applications is the reality of there is no common application. So for every school you want to apply to for a master's or a doctoral program, you can expect that you will have to fill out an entire application, starting with your first and last name. So that is something to keep in mind as you think about where you want to apply. And that also means that you will have that many essays to write across those applications. So I'm going to pause there before I talk about your audience to check in with you to see what questions you might have at this point. So again, you can unmute your audio and ask, or you can type it in the chat so we can answer it for you. Chatting. All right. Oh, question. Question is from Stephanos, is the statement of objectives same as an SOP? Yes, that is another terminology. It depends on where you're applying. European universities in South America, other places sometimes called it something different than a statement of purpose. But what your objective for applying to graduate school is the same as what your statement of purpose is. Other questions? You're welcome. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about your audience. So another difference between undergraduate applications for college and graduate school is who your audience actually is. And this is important to keep in mind, because when you apply to college, your application, I'll use Georgia Tech, went to the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, and the professionals that reviewed your application have a variety of academic backgrounds. And they are reviewing applications for the entire university. So they're thinking in terms of who's a great fit for Georgia Tech. And they're making decisions with regards to the university itself. And the first time that your professors in your major saw your name was on a roster. It wasn't actually on the top of an application. And that makes a college application audience very different than a graduate school application audience. For graduate school, when you apply to graduate school, and I'm going to use Georgia Tech as an example, we have the Office of Graduate Studies. And if you're applying for a master's or a doctoral program at Georgia Tech, you apply to the Office of Graduate Studies, the graduate school. They are checking your application for eligibility, but then they actually hand your application off to the specific program and the specific faculty review committee in that program. So you've now gone from a very broad audience to a very specific one. And the professors in that program now have a voice in whom they are actually going to do research with and whom they're going to actually teach. And that has a total impact on what your application looks like, in particular, your statement of purpose. Because you have the people in the program, the faculty making decisions about admissions for themselves. They're not receiving a roster that says, here are your new students. They are determining who their new students are going to be. And that means when you write your statement of purpose, you have to write as if you have to write in a way that shows that you know what you're talking about in your field. And that's different than your college application, where there was room for creative writing and literary metaphors and those types of stylistic elements. The graduate school application statement of purpose is different. So you want to be sure that you keep your audience in mind. So let's take a look here at what a prompt might be. This is from a program at Stanford, and remember that the prompts are not standard across universities. They are not even standard across programs in the same college. So this is for a program at Stanford. When you look at the prompt, your statement of purpose should be concise, focused, and well written. It should describe succinctly your reasons for applying to the proposed program at Stanford, your preparation for this field of study, research interests, future career plans, and other aspects of your background and interest, which may aid the admissions committee in evaluating your aptitude and motivation for graduate study. So I'm going to pause for a second, and if anybody that's with us today can remember what you wrote your application statement or your essay for Georgia Tech on, I would really be interested to hear from you. And it's okay if you can't remember. That's usually a pretty common reaction. You don't remember. Nobody remembers, right? So you'll notice this is very specific. They don't want to know about a life-changing experience. They don't want to know what you did in your summer. They want to know specifically why you think you're qualified for graduate school. And on the right here, the 3 essential questions that are going to be asked by a graduate school, even though they might not be worded this way. There's what is your goal? What have you done to work towards that goal? And that includes research experience, internships, academic background, all those elements that have helped you discern that you want to go to graduate school, that you need to go to graduate school, you should go to graduate school, and how those align with your goals. And then how, for this particular instance, how can Stanford specifically help you get to your goal? And Stanford doesn't want to know about itself. It wants to know what about Stanford specifically for you in your efforts to reach your goal is going to help you get there. So again, very different experience in writing than you might have had for undergrad. So I'm going to pause there and again see if anyone has any questions or comments about the prompt, the type of prompt you're going to see. And as Shannon pointed out, you can also raise your hand if you'd like. Put it in the chat or just ask it out loud. No questions? All right. What I see a lot of, and I read a lot of documents, I have read hundreds and hundreds of documents in my time at Tech. And one of the most common...
Susan?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Question.
Yep, we did have a question. Zara is asking if you can provide an example of what you mean by why we would choose Stanford rather than just telling Stanford about itself.
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but I'll go ahead and answer that question. So here's an example of telling Stanford about itself. Stanford is one of the top universities in the world with world-renowned faculty and great facilities. Stanford knows that about itself. Stanford wants to know specifically what in its programs, and that could be if you're applying for a PhD, who specifically in the program is doing research that aligns with your interests. It's not of interest, it's not interesting to you, it aligns with your interests because you've been spending the last 4 or 5 years actually learning to do research in a particular area. It can be facilities if it's specific. I'll use an example of a student I worked with last year who is now in a PhD program at MIT. For them, there was some high level, highly advanced equipment that they needed access to actually continue the research they'd been doing at Tech that Tech didn't have. but the university that they were applying to did. And so they were able to write about how having access to that particular equipment would actually help them advance their research. So that's why Stanford, or in that case MIT, why it specifically will help you reach your goal. That is not what I call website language or brochure language, where they're going to try to lure you in because it's in California, for example. So, Dara, I was going to ask you if that answered your question, and you just chatted and said, yes, that answered your question. So, what other questions are there out there about that piggyback off Zara's question? No questions? Okay. So one of the common, I don't like to call it a mistake, I call it just not knowing, is showing, not telling. So what does that mean? When you are doing your statement of purpose, when you're writing it, what you want to be mindful of is that it does not turn into a prose form of your resume, which could be turned into just bullet points or just look at your resume. When you tell your audience about yourself, you are not providing what those of you that work with me call I call it the connective tissue between your experiences and where you are now as an applicant for a graduate school program. Now, I generally don't like to read from the screen, but I am going to read this because that will, I think, will help you gather what I mean here. When you tell, so using this top part, and if you're a BME major, I took this as from BME, but in the spring of 2019, I led a class project as a student of Dr. Ima Lopez. Our project entailed developing an ergonomic blood testing kit for individuals with diabetes and limited hand dexterity. We used feedback from individuals who could benefit from the device to improve our design with each iteration. After that, I interned at Big Company and worked on. So in the telling part, the writer has actually offered the reader no explanation as to why they're being told this, other than to provide a prose form of the resume. I did A, then I did B, I did C. There's no explanation to me as a reader how A led to B, or how A shaped the decision to take on the internship at Big Company. I'm going to pause there because I see we have another question. Given that we are already submitting a CV, how do we not repeat experiences a lot? It's not about repeating the experiences, it's about providing the backstory behind the experiences that are listed in your CV. Because again, your CV, if you think about it, it's all bullet points. It's what you did, but it doesn't tell me why you did what you did. And I want to know why you did what you did. A statement of purpose, when I tell you, just tells the reader what you did. When you show the reader, it explains why you did A after B, or why you chose not to do B because of A. Colin has a question. Look at various prompts and try to draft my statement of purpose. I feel very much like I'm struggling to generally segment or figure out how to divide content between some of the example prompts. Many of them seem to ask for a brief overview and then ask, why does this matter? All right, Colin, hold that question here because Shashwati, what's the best way to reuse modified essays strategically? I'm sure most of us are too short in time to write every single essay from scratch. Okay, so the clue to that, the key to that is if you're applying for, say, 5 schools, the 3 main questions that you're going to be answering, especially that what have you done to work towards your goal? Your goal likely isn't going to change across programs. If you want to be an academic researcher and you're applying to doctoral programs, my guess is that's going to stay the same. So that's one section you'll be able to use. And then that section about what have you done to work towards that goal, for the most part, will be very similar. You might have to tweak it depending on the focus of the program, but that is the one section that you will be able to reuse across your essays. And I'm going to hold off on going into more detail because I do talk about that a little later, Saswati. And Colin, to go back to your question, many of them seem to ask for a brief overview and then ask, why does this matter? That's the showing part. They really want to know. Oh, it's okay, Saswati. Colin, they really want to know why you're telling them this. They want you to show them. If you don't show them, you're in this first part. You're in this telling piece. You're just bullet pointing things. They want to know how your experiences come together. And I can certainly help you with that in a one-on-one appointment to work through the struggles that you might be having with your writing of these essays. Because these are challenging to write, especially if you're not used to writing in this way. If you're used to writing more technically, or you haven't written something in a long time of this nature, or you never have, it's a lot more challenging than you might think it could be. So everyone here, I want you to look at the showing section. Colin, did that answer your question, by the way? Yes, okay, good. So take a look at the showing. I've taken the telling, and now I'm going to turn it into showing. So in the spring of 2019, I led a class project as a student of Dr. Ina Lopez. Our project entailed developing an ergonomic blood testing kit for individuals with diabetes and very limited hand dexterity. We used feedback from individuals who could benefit from the device to improve our design with each iteration. So far it's the same. But now, prior to doing research, I did not understand how difficult checking one's blood sugar could be if you cannot move your hands easily. Being a part of a research team that included end users in the design process not only taught me how invaluable their feedback is, but also made me realize that I wanted to continue to be part of research that can improve the daily lives of others. My team ultimately created a device that is now awaiting FDA approval and that will positively impact the quality of life for many. The experiences developing the blood test kit led me to seek out an internship at big company in order to gain more skills in. I have now provided the why do these things matter for me by showing. So I start showing here prior to doing such research, and then I have a pretty lengthy explanation as to how that led into the next experience. And this is where you want to be in your writing, the showing, not telling. I'm going to follow up with everybody, and I'm going to send you some one-pagers that give you even more details about how to go about this. All right, sorry, and SOPs that are very short. Johns Hopkins only accepts one page. Yes, good old Johns Hopkins. How do we fit in the showing strategy for all the examples? Use fewer words, and you might not be able to, you don't necessarily have to show for every example, but you can show for key examples. But you definitely want to try to avoid that just telling, that prose form of the resume. You're welcome. What other questions do you have about the showing, don't telling? And as I said, this is being recorded, so I'll send this to everybody, and then I'll send you the one-pagers as well. Shannon has a question.
No, it's not a question. It's just a reinforcement. For the last question, remember that you are not including every example. So, especially when you're limited on space, you're not going to include every detail that's on your resume in the statement. So hit the ones that are most essential, and then you'll discover that you have more space to amplify with that insight that's going to make the example that you've chosen come to life.
Yes, thank you, Shannon. And also, if there are no specific formatting guidelines regarding spacing, single spacing is your friend. And using a smaller font is a way to get more words on a page. For example, Arial is a pretty large font, and if you use Times New Roman, you can actually get more words on the same page by just using a different style of font. So there's some tricks like that too. All right, customizing your writing. So this goes back to the question about how do I show Stanford, why Stanford is so important to me? And this was Zara's question. So another important part about your statement of purpose, answering that question, why Stanford, why MIT, why University of Texas at Austin, particular
Susan,
program.
I'm interrupting to say that I think there might be some connectivity issues, and for me, since the start of this slide, it was just a little garbled, in case you want to review once more.
Okay. So let me backtrack. I am having networking issues. Great. Okay.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. So on my end, I have a little swirl that says resolving networking issues. My Wi-Fi went down 10 minutes before the presentation is supposed to start. All right, so customizing. Part of your statement of purpose is to explain to that program why you want to be in that program. And as I mentioned before, it is not because you're located in California, Stanford, and because you're one of the top universities in the world, Stanford. It's more specific. How do your interests and goals align with specific elements of that program? If you're applying for a doctoral program or for a master's program that's research-based, this means you have to show how your research interests and experiences align with the work of 2 to 3 professors that you want to do research with. And that is very important because that's what I call the funding paragraph. This is where those researchers are going to start looking at you not only as an applicant who would do well in their program, but also potentially as someone they would offer funding to. And funding is how you pay for your doctorate. Master's programs, that can come in the form of research assistantships or teaching assistantships. Some programs require that you do both. Some pick for you, some let you pick. Master's programs that are not research-based, that are project-based, coursework-based, more application-based, generally are self-funded. So you want to think about that as well. And that still means you need to tell them specifically why that program, but it doesn't have to list professors that you want to do research with. It could be opportunities to do internships in industry as a master's student. It could be there's a partnership or initiative with a local hospital or an industry partner that would allow you to cross between academic research and industry research. So that's what I mean about those specific elements. Question, if we want to do interdisciplinary work that would probably need advisors across departments, is that something to avoid mentioning? No, if the program itself is not interdisciplinary, but they give you the opportunity maybe to do interdisciplinary work, then you would want to detail that as a benefit to you. Let's say Stanford does let you work with other departments. That would help you get to your goal. Is that what you're asking? You want to do? Yes, because there are some programs that I've seen at Carnegie Mellon. At Georgia Tech actually has got some programs where you apply through one academic home, but you have the opportunity to work across disciplines. But you have to pick one to apply through, and then you have the opportunity to do that interdisciplinary work. So you'd have to look more specifically at how the program is set up. All right, question. If we're interested in a research subject that lies within an overall research aim of a faculty, but isn't on their website, would you recommend writing research project suggestions I have for my PhD? So in this paragraph, you're writing about where you hope your research can go, which is essentially your research project. But if that's what you're asking, Zara.
Just to clarify, what I mean is, for example, a professor, this is like a very broad example, but a professor like works on a T-cell immunization, and then my specific passion is to do like research on like multiple sclerosis that involves like T-cell like, and then I was wondering if it is recommended to add like research ideas that aren't what the faculty isn't working on, but like would be possible to work on if I joined the research lab. Like, would you recommend that?
You can do that. That paragraph is not, it's not a really lengthy paragraph. It's more about being specific. But you can mention that you would hope to have the opportunity to do additional research. What you have to be mindful of is you are stepping into someone else's research space. That's going to be controlled by the PI, by the grant, where the money is going. And so you want to not come across as if you're going to come in with these other ideas and be as specific as possible. Shannon, do you want to add to that? Put you on the spot a little bit.
I think that what really matters is that you're genuine. And
Yes.
if you know you want to do multiple sclerosis research and that's your big ultimate goal, I think it'd be wise to go ahead and announce that and then demonstrate how the research in the lab that already exists would advance you toward that goal.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
The faculty don't want to duplicate their own research. That would be redundant. They want to inform other research, so their research branches out into different directions. But that's not a bad thing to indicate. And, it would suggest that you're bringing a set of specific experiences and skills into that space that might be valuable to them.
Yeah. Thank you, Shannon. And also, Zara, I was thinking, like, if you said, oh, but we could also do this, you just have to be careful how you phrase that, right? As long as it's attached, like Shannon said, you want to do T cells, but you have the specific interest in multiple sclerosis. So the customizing your writing, I've mentioned the things to avoid, telling the program about yourself. And another thing I see when something isn't customized in writing is if I can pull out the name of one program and replace it with another. So let's use a master's program that's project-based and application-based. It's not research-based. And if I can switch out the name of a university in a program and put in another one, you haven't customized your writing. And it applies the same to the doctoral level. But at the doctoral level, you do actually have to name people you want to do research with, or for a master's that's thesis-based. If the program isn't at the master's level thesis-based, then that's where I tend to see that a little bit more, where I could just switch out the name. And if I can do that, you haven't customized it enough. I shouldn't be able to do that as a reader. And that comes across to the faculty review committee too, where they think, oh, we're just being switched out. What other questions are there about customizing your writing or anything else that we've talked about before I move on? Questions? So how do you get started? I like to tell those of you who are in the writing process is to draft like you think. I am a very, very word-based, literal person, but I also taught foreign language for 17 years. And I tend to think in language charts. I see my world like visually. I see things in charts. I even use Excel for word sorting. Like I use it for numbers, but I use it for words too. And so I encourage you to draft like you think. There can be this pressure that you have to draft like you might have learned in an English class in 9th grade. And you don't. You don't have to use an outline. You can do bullet point journaling, where you just bullet point your ideas. You can write full sentences and do free writing. But you can also use an Excel spreadsheet. So unless you have a prompt, you've got 3 questions to answer, you do columns and you just jot down under each column things you want to write about. You can do a table in Word. Whatever it is, I want you to draft in a way that you think. And then you move to the writing into a statement of purpose. It's hard to put judgment aside when you're drafting, especially when you're trying to get your first ideas down, but it's not about being really good or high quality in your first drafts. It's about getting your ideas down so that you can focus your thoughts and your writing to get to that point where you are ready to submit it, because it's the best presentation of yourself that you have created. And the number of drafts you need doesn't matter. It's the quality of your statement that does. I've worked with students that were done after 3 drafts, and I've worked with students that were done after 30. And good news, everybody, my services are free. I don't charge you by the draft. What I want you to leave with, if you work with any of the pre-professional advisors, is the learning experience of how to reflect and articulate your experiences in a way that's effective and present your application in the best way possible for you, because your name is on the application, mine isn't. And if that takes 30 drafts, well, so be it. It takes 30 drafts. There's no judgment involved there, and it can be hard to not get bogged down in the numbers themselves. Like I have a lot of students apologize to me that'll say, I'm sorry, this is my 10th draft. It doesn't matter to me if it's your 10th draft. What I want for you is to leave every revision meeting feeling better about your writing and having grown as a writer for this particular genre. Questions? What questions do you have about drafting? Again, I'm going to send you those 1-pagers to help you get started or help you continue in your writing. No questions? All right. So getting started. Revising your draft. So let's say you're in that, question. Yes, we want you to grow through the application experience. And thank you, Shannon. Yay. So let's say you've already gotten your first draft done. It could be the 3rd draft or the 30th draft. So some general tips about revising. Remember, you only have 1 to 2 pages. So we know Johns Hopkins and some programs likes 1 page. I haven't seen a program yet that doesn't give you a page limit. And if there isn't one, don't go past 2 pages. So say more with fewer words. Combine and condense your thoughts. Avoid very lengthy sentences. One thing I see a lot is you want to count how many times you use the word I. How many sentences start with I? And if you see a lot of that, you want to go in and vary your sentence structure. So using introductory phrases here, but not always using them in the following sentences. When you get help from anyone, whether it's communication the comm lab or me or another professor or friend, you want to make sure that you keep your voice because we all have different writing styles. Your grad mentor, yes. So Taylor asked, yes, look at our writing. Your grad mentors, your research supervisors can be great people to get feedback on. You want to trust that person to be honest with you. I will tell all of you, those of you who've met with me, I am honest with you, and I will tell you if it's not good. I'm not here to tell you that it's good when it's not. I'm here to help you get better in your writing. Your mom or your dad or your best friend might say, oh, this is great, and it might not be. So you want to make sure you're working with someone that's going to give you constructive, respectful feedback about your writing so that you can then go back and revise it. Zara said, I have a problem being wordy. What is your tip or strategy concising? So first is just draft it out. Don't worry about editing while you're drafting. Just if you need, if you put down 100 words and it come down to being 10, just get your ideas down first. And anyone whom you work with, again, those of you that work with me, I read your draft out loud, and the reason I do that is because what usually happens is you hear how lengthy your sentences are. And then you go, oh, that's a really long sentence. If I have to take 2 breaths to get to the end of your sentence, it's probably a little bit too long. Or read it out to yourself. Sometimes it's a matter of just not knowing different synonyms, especially for perhaps, for example, if English is not your first language, you might speak 3 or 4 other languages and you write in a way that's not necessarily, it's just a different way of going about expressing yourself. So sometimes it's you're trying to write more flowery and creative rather than more straightforward and technical. And that can come with understanding the genre. So Zara, to go back to your concern about being wordy, that comes with practice, but it can also be really valuable for you to work with someone to help you combine and condense your thoughts. So no one that's in this meeting is here alone. You've got help on campus. Like I said, you can get a grad mentor, you can get a research supervisory to help you with your writing, especially. You're welcome, Zara. Those of you that are in technical majors, one of the challenges I see is is leaving out smooth transitions between paragraphs. And where this comes from is if you have spent a lot of time writing technical reports, you've read a lot of research articles, the headers in research articles are your transitions. So abstract, bold header, then the abstract, then participants, bold header, data collection, bold header. So in a technical report or in an academic journal that's technical, those transitions take care of those headers take care of the transitions. In this genre or in a more humanities based, you don't necessarily have those headers to take care of the transitions. And so creating smooth transitions, like learning to not be wordy, takes practice. And sometimes it's a matter of just using one or two words to create a transition, or it can be having to redo the end of one paragraph to link it more closely to the paragraph that follows. But this is not a criticism, it's just something to be mindful of. If I can take a paragraph out of your statement and have it not really affect the one before the one after it, that means you haven't connected things. And that can be a signal that you need to go look at your transitions. Speaking of technical writing, how technical should it be? Oh, thank you for asking that question. So your audience is going to be in your field that you're hoping to get into, so it's your chance to shine technically, but it's not your chance to write in the way that you might if you are submitting for an academic journal. You need to write technically, but not everybody on that review committee is going to have the same specialties. So we were talking about T cells earlier for multiple sclerosis. Not everybody in your review committee, that might not be their specialty. They might be very well versed in T cells or not as much because they work on something else. So you'll have a technical audience and you want to write in a way that you show your reader that you know your stuff, but you're not submitting to an academic journal. I don't have a technical background. I have read a lot of technical things and I can work my way through a lot of technical writing. But if you hand me a research article about T-cell research for multiple sclerosis or cystic fibrosis or other, and it's from an academic journal, I would probably have a hard time getting past the first paragraph because it's so technical. If you're applying for a PhD program and you are asked for a research statement, that is your chance to shine fully as a technician in your field. And that is where your faculty especially will come in handy, your research faculty that you're working with, grad students. But for the SOP, it's technical, but not what I call over-the-top technical. Other questions about the level of technical writing? And if you're applying to a program that isn't, that's in a humanity, you're not going to write technically, but you're still going to write in the language of your field. So you're going to use vocabulary that's common in your field. Let's say public policy, or if it's political science. We don't have political science necessarily, but public policy, or if you're applying for a literature PhD, you want to write using the language of your field, but again, not like you'd see in an academic journal. Some strategies for revising your drafts. I mentioned reading out loud. Know what your takeaways are. And what I mean by that is, what do you want your reader to walk away with from each paragraph, possibly from each sentence, and also from the whole statement itself? I, as a reader, what do you want me to be able to say to someone if someone asked me for an executive summary? What would I say? What would you want me to say? And so keeping what you want your takeaways to be in mind is helpful. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about color coding and give you some examples of how that works, and then get help with your writing. So we've mentioned I'm on campus to help you. I also work with alumni. So if you are an alum in the audience, pre-graduate and pre-professional advising supports alumni. If you are a master's student applying for a doctoral program, we also support graduate students. And if you're an undergrad applying to any graduate program, we support you as well. You've got the COM lab, you've got your research supervisor, your grad mentors that can help you as well. So getting help with your writing can be invaluable to helping you finish faster and helping you to create the best statement of purpose that you can. All right, let's talk about color coding. This is something I really like to do. This is the teacher in me. So I'm going back to that prompt from Stanford. And what I did with the prompt was I actually color coded the 3 questions you're being asked, because it looks like one question, but it's really 3 questions. And this first part is your reasons for applying to the proposed program at Stanford. So that's that, how can Stanford help you get to your goal question? The blue is about what have you done to work towards your goal, your preparation for this field of study, research interests, and other aspects of your background and interests. And the green, tucked right in there in the middle of that other question, is what's your goal? And those are 3 separate questions. And then again, like I talked about before, evaluating your aptitude and motivation for a graduate study. They want to know specifically why Stanford and why you want to be at Stanford. So when you color code a prompt, you color code it according to the separate pieces of the prompt that are essentially different questions. And then when you write, you color code your writing according to which part of the prompt you think you're answering. So the example I have on the right, this is not a full statement, it's just for the sake of demonstration. But let's say this is a paragraph and I thought, oh, I'm going to talk about my career plan. So I've got all this stuff in green and I write and I write and I write. And then I go back and color code it and I realize, oh, I actually threw in some how have I been preparing for this. And then I threw in a little bit about why Stanford. And if you do that across a whole statement, what it can create is a disjointed statement. It can lack structure because you're interweaving answers to different questions. That isn't to say you can't write like that, but you have to be mindful that you fully answer each part of the question and each part of the prompt. And you also want to make sure that you don't overpower your SOP with an answer to one part of the prompt and you completely leave out or barely answer another part of the prompt. And for this, actually, this blue part, which is what have you done to work towards your goal, that is that big section in your SOP when you talk about your research, you talk about your experiences, your internships, your school, your classwork. That is a fat section of your SOP. So imagine if this were your entire statement. You spent a lot of time talking about your career plans and kind of didn't really explain how you figured that out. Color coding can be tedious, but the results in helping you get a visual, like a data visualization almost, of what your statement is looking like in a alignment with whether or not you're answering parts of the prompts can be really helpful. Has anyone in the audience actually used color coding? I know I've met with some of you and I've suggested it, but I'm curious for those of you that have used it. All right, well now y'all have some homework. Color code your prompt. Oh, I see. No issues, but that's an awesome tip. Oh, thank you, Colin. All right, let's take a look now. Writing resources. Reading writing samples. You can go online and somewhere in the world, somewhere on the internet, you're going to find samples of statements of purpose. What these can do for you is give you a sense of what someone thought was a good statement of purpose for them. It can give you a sense of maybe how you could go about writing your own statement of purpose. Those are pros. The cons are you now have someone else's statement of purpose in your head, and you might be thinking yours has to be exactly the same. And maybe that person was a really phenomenal writer and you struggle with writing. So now you've got a bit of insecurity about your ability to write. So I tend to suggest that you don't look at anybody else's writing. You have confidence in yourself and in the advising and guidance you can get from others so that your statement is fully your own and not influenced by someone else. I mentioned the tech support you've got on campus. You've also got the Comm Lab. And then online, this is definitely not an exhaustive list, but if you don't know about the Purdue Writing Lab, it's a very, very helpful site for mechanics of writing. If you're writing research and you need citations, there's a whole section of citations that'll show you the right way to do citations. And then if you struggle with grammar, Grammarly.com is one place that you can go. It's also an app that you can use, and it'll actually, if you're not familiar with it, once you put it on your computer, it'll guide your writing in different ways. So those are some writing resources that you can turn to. I mentioned the one-pagers that I will send to you. They are also on the pre-graduate advising website already, and I will, when I follow up with you, an email. So I'm going to pause there and see what other questions there might be. We have about 15 minutes left. No questions? Okay. So some final writing tips. Let's say you are ready to submit. What a feeling. Some final writing tips. Read your SOP backwards. I got this tip from one of my high school English teachers, and I have never forgotten it. It has been invaluable in my own writing. I've been through a master's program. I am a doctoral student, and I can tell you I still use this technique. So I'm going to go back to the telling, not showing. And this is that passage from the telling, just for the sake of example. So when you read backwards, so let's start timeline-wise, when do you suggest wrapping up our SOP and submitting it? So one before the deadline is ideal, of course, right? But the earlier the better, but earlier only if it's your best work. I don't want you to rush because you think you have to get it in 3 weeks early. Your application will be reviewed if you get it in by the deadline. I always suggest to anyone who is currently applying to grad school, applying for fellowships, working on your senior project, your capstone, that if you can get these applications done before Thanksgiving, that gives you Thanksgiving, going into finals, not worrying about anything but Thanksgiving and finals, and then you go into winter break being able to possibly fully relax. So that's my recommendation, if you can get it done before Thanksgiving. And that's not always feasible for everybody, but definitely before the deadline, maybe before Thanksgiving. So let's say you are done and you're ready to submit. Before you submit, I want you to read your SOP backwards. So if this were the statement, I would actually start at the end and I'd work my way backwards. So I'd read this sentence first. We use feedback from individuals, and then I'd read this sentence, and then I'd read this sentence. In the original, this was the first sentence, this was the second sentence, this was the third sentence. And the reason you do that is because it takes you out of the flow of your thoughts. And it forces you to look at a sentence on its own. And it is a great way to find tiny typos you might have missed, or you hear like, oh, that's kind of awkward. I've caught a lot of mistakes in my own writing by doing this. You're not reading backwards word for word. You're not going to go iteration each with design, because that would sound like Gollum out there talking, for those of you Lord of the Rings fans, or Yoda. That's not what it is. It's just about reading backwards, and so you take it out of the flow of the thought. Let me come back to your question, Colin. Hold on for a second. Before you turn in your whole application, make sure you follow the formatting requirements. Make sure your file names follow any guidelines given. Put all your applications in the same font and style and size unless told otherwise. Double check you've used the correct program name throughout your documents, and make sure you remove all comments and notations from your final draft. So go back to Colin's question. I was told that when asking for recs, you should send your statement of purpose along, but also that you should ask for recommendations many months. So two things, many months, it depends on when you've come into the application process. A lot of applications are due in December, so many months for me is several weeks. If you know you're applying to grad school and your applications are due December 1st, Thursday is October 1st, you want to go ahead and ask your letter writers, because you can't always assume they're going to say yes. And if one of them says no, you then got to spend some time finding another letter writer. Statements of purpose, depending on where they are in their draft, you may or may not feel comfortable sending that to a letter writer. You can send your resume, and it's also helpful to ask if you can set up even a 15-minute appointment with your letter writer once they've committed to talk about what your goals are. And that's a workaround if you don't have your statement of purpose in order yet, is to see if you can talk to them for 15 minutes. But it is okay to send a draft. Just put, like, full disclosure, this is a rough draft of where I'm going, because that helps the letter writer know where your thinking is as well. Did that answer your question, Colin? Yes, okay, good. All right, after you submit, first of all, celebrate. Getting through applications is a bear, and treat yourself. So whatever, binge watch, get an ice cream. I know it's hard in COVID. It's probably, you can't do everything you might go do. But do treat yourself and celebrate your success, because it is a success to get through an application process. Send thank you notes. So Shannon and I are both advisors. We have advised hundreds, if not thousands of students at this point in our career. And there is nothing like getting a thank you note. An email, lovely. I can tell you a handwritten thank you note, I keep them. I keep them in a folder that says yay me on it. And when I'm having a bad day, I pull out one of them and I look at it and say, okay, this earth for a reason. So there's really nothing like a thank you note. You don't have to, don't buy gifts. We can't accept gifts. Cookies, yes, but not like a $30 gift card anywhere. Don't spend money. Just spend the time thanking the people who helped you get you through your application process. And as Shannon said, yes, celebrate safely with people you love if you can. And then keep the people who helped you in the loop. Let them know if you've gotten accepted. Let them know if you didn't get accepted. That's okay. Because again, they helped you get you to where you could submit that application. And it's like, if the musician's out there, it's like not finishing a chord, kind of just dangling, or it's like a cliffhanger for a show. You're like wondering what happened to the students that you help. So as much as you can, just be mindful of these things. Celebrate your success in finishing, send thank you notes, and follow up once you found out about the decision. So questions and concerns. What questions do you have just in general? What concerns do you have? Oh, I've done a great job. No questions or concerns.
Sorry, I had a quick question.
Yes.
What is your recommendation for like a impressive start for an SOP? Like, how would you go about starting it? Like, would you say something that's more personal, or something that's like matter-of-factly, or I don't know. What's your recommendation?
Gotcha. Thank you for asking that question, because I forgot to talk about that. So remember that this genre is not flowery and it's not literary. It's not creative writing. That could lend itself to being, you might think, oh, that's kind of boring, but you don't have a lot of real estate. You don't have a lot of space to wax philosophical or go deeply into these emotional aspects of why you're applying to graduate school. You don't want to write about your journeys or your paths or your audience. Remember who your audience is. Right? If you're in a technical field, your audience is going to be very technical in how they think and how they write. If you're applying in a humanities field, your audience is still going to expect you to be able to articulate your goals and your experiences getting to that goal, and that why you want to go into that program in 2 pages. And it's not a short story. It's different. It's got a different kind of narrative than a creative short story. So my suggestion is that you just write and draft to begin with, but then likely if you get feedback from me or from someone else, all that creative stuff will probably be pulled out to a large extent. It doesn't mean you can't add personal elements. And Harsh, yes, I'm glad you asked about personal statements because Zara, you do have an element, a chance to write more personally if you're asked for a personal statement or a diversity statement. That is your chance to talk about more what life experiences are motivating you to apply to grad school. So I'll use an example of a student I work with who had their grandmother died of Alzheimer's when they were in high school, and that actually spurred them into doing research in college that was focused on Alzheimer's, and they now want to go on to do research, get a doctorate, so they continue that research. So the personal story behind why they want to get a doctorate in order to do Alzheimer's research was based in something that happened in their personal life. Okay, so how would our writing differ from that? So remember the SOP is going to answer 3 questions. What's your goal? What have you done to work towards that goal? And why do you want to go to that particular program? A personal statement is more about what's happened in your life that has motivated you to even want to go to graduate school. That's personal. That's separate from the research that you've done. That can be separate from it. Let's see. I don't understand why I need to reiterate the experience that's already on my CV. Of course, there's a way I can extend it to my goals and grad studies, but I could also just strategically frame my CV. Actually, not necessarily. So I can look at your CV and see what your experiences are, but just like applying for a job, unless you specifically apply to a specific job, I don't really know what your goal is. Right? I don't know what your objective is. I can see where your skills and your experiences are leaning, but I can't tell by looking at a CV or a resume necessarily that you want to get a doctorate in a particular field to do a particular kind of research at the graduate level. I can see what you've done, but I can't necessarily assume that that's where you want to go. Should we write one or both? You're only going to write it as personal statement if you're asked for one, asked to write one. Berkeley, and if you were thinking about applying to Berkeley loves the personal statement. They will call it a personal history. And then you also write a statement of purpose. But a lot of graduate programs don't ask for a personal statement. They just ask for a statement of purpose. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us. And yes, I mentioned Berkeley. They do require both. Yes, and there's an event tomorrow, a boot camp. I'll send you the flyer if you're not on the pre-graduate listserv already. There's a virtual writing boot camp where you will just write for 2 hours. We're using Gatherly, and you will be able to pop into the Gatherly space and go to a table and get one-on-one feedback about your writing. There will be 6 of us there, and it's 2 hours long. It's a great way to get started on your first draft or get feedback on your 15th. It doesn't matter where you are in your writing. I hope you can come, and I will send that information out to all of you as a follow-up. Zara, I sent out the URL today, but if you signed up after, like, later this afternoon, I'm going to follow back up and send it out again to everybody. So it depends on when I sent out the information. So I'll send that back out to you. What other questions or concerns are there before we end our time? We have about 3 more minutes. And you can go to the pre-graduate website, Pre-Grad Advising, and see the information about the events that are coming up as well. Following up on the last question, I understand that I need to articulate my goals in the SOP. What I'm confused about is framing my experience towards those goals in a way that doesn't have a lot of repetition with my CV. It is going to repeat it, but it's going to tell the story of how they all link together. Like, why did you do that internship in 2018 and then decide to do research in that lab for a year? And how do those experiences, how have they shaped your decision to go to graduate school, to become an academic researcher? And these are things that we can definitely talk about more fully in an appointment. What other questions are there? Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm so glad all of you came. Oh, I see one more chat. Let's see. So if we want to write a draft for tomorrow, an SOP, would it be good practice just to try to write a draft with 3 goals? Colin, I would actually find out if you have drafts from the particular programs, which will be available in the actual applications, to look at the draft, to look at the prompt itself. Those 3 questions I gave you are generally how if I look at a prompt, that's generally how they translate. Those are the 3 questions they're asking, but you want to make sure that the prompt itself doesn't include an additional question that might not be there. But for tomorrow, by all means, just get a first draft out following one of the prompts that you have.
Yeah, boss.
What other questions? We got 2 minutes.
You had to wait. You had to wait.
Shannon, I see you have your hand up.
Who, me?
Yes. Do you have your hand up?
I think that's from earlier. Apologies.
Okay. Alex, the school specific, but one of the programs I'm applying for is a bunch of shorter questions that seem a bit more personal. It's not common, but I do see it as well, and that particular program. I've seen this across some programs. That's basically their way of getting you to write a personal statement. They're just giving you the shorter questions to answer, which can actually be easier in some ways because you're not trying to create a whole narrative that's a personal statement. And I can help you with those too, Alex. Last minute questions? All right, everybody, well, it's 5 o'clock. Thank you so much for spending an hour in your afternoon with me, and I'm here on campus to help. And I hope to hear from you. You can make an appointment with me through AdvisorLink. And as I said, I will follow up with all of you with that information. And then also, Zara, it's okay, that's your nephew. I will follow up with all of you about information for tomorrow's event. And Zara, I'll send you make sure you get the login information for tomorrow's boot camp as well. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your evening. Take care.
Thank you.